Hi, this is Dr. Ben Finio with Science Buddies, and this video is an introduction to how to use a breadboard. This is a breadboard. It's a rectangular piece of plastic with a grid of holes that allows you to easily and quickly build electronic circuits by pushing electronic components into the holes. For example, simple circuits like this one with a battery and an on-off switch to control a light. You can also build more complicated circuits, for example lights that flash automatically or robots of all shapes and sizes. There are far more examples than we can list in the beginning of this short video. At this point, you might be thinking that this doesn't really look like it has anything to do with bread. The name breadboard comes from the early days of electronic circuits when people would literally use wooden boards with screws or nails driven into them to make electronic connections. Modern breadboards are made from plastic and come in all shapes, sizes, and even different colors. The most common sizes you'll probably see are full-size breadboards, half-size breadboards, and mini breadboards. Larger and smaller sizes are available, and many breadboards come with tabs or notches on the sides that allow you to snap them together. But a single breadboard will be more than sufficient for most beginner projects. Let's take a closer look at how a breadboard works. The holes of a breadboard allow you to push the leads or metal legs of a component like this LED into them and then lightly hold them in place. This connection is strong enough that the LED won't fall out on its own, but light enough that if you make a mistake, you can easily pull it out and put it in a new location. Technically, these are called solderless breadboards because they can make these connections without using solder or melted metal to permanently bond the electronic components together. Let's find out how breadboards can hold on to components without using solder. If you flip over a breadboard, you'll see that it comes with an adhesive backing that allows you to attach it to a project, for example, the breadboard attached to this robot. If you remove that backing completely, like I've done here, you expose a series of metal strips that are inside the breadboard. These metal strips are what make mechanical and electrical connections to the components you insert into the breadboard. We can remove one of these metal strips by pushing it out from the front to see what it looks like up close. Each strip is a series of 5 clips that line up with the holes in the breadboard. When you push a component into the breadboard, these clips are what's actually grabbing onto the leads, as you can see here with this LED. This breadboard is actually made from transparent plastic, so you can see the clips from the outside. When you press a lead into one of the holes, it's just getting grabbed onto by one of these clips. Let's take a closer look at the writing on the front of your breadboard. Your breadboard has columns labeled A through J, and rows that start with number 1 and go up to a number that depends on the size of the breadboard. These labels make it easy to follow directions when building a circuit. For example, all of these holes are in column C, and all of these holes are in row 12. Hole C12 is where column C intersects row 12. There are also long strips on the side of the breadboard that are usually labeled with red and black or red and blue lines, and also a plus or minus sign. These are called either buses or rails and are used to deliver power to your entire circuit. Typically, the red one marked with the plus sign connects to a positive battery wire, and the black or blue one marked with the minus sign connects to a negative battery wire. Some breadboards, like this mini one, do not have power buses at all. Some full-size breadboards, like this one, have power buses that run the entire length, as indicated by the continuous, unbroken red and black lines. Other ones have power buses that only run half the length of the breadboard, as indicated by the break in the lines here. This is convenient if you have a circuit that needs to be powered by 2 different voltage levels. In order to use a breadboard, it really helps to understand how all the holes are connected. Let's take a look at hole A1 as an example. Remember that inside the breadboard are sets of 5 metal clips. This means that hole A1 is electrically connected to holes B1, C1, D1, and E1. It is not connected to hole A2 because that hole is in a different row and they do not share the same set of metal clips. It is also not connected to any of the holes on the other side of the gap in the middle of the breadboard: F1, G1, H1, I1, or J1. We'll explain more about the gap later in the video. This diagram shows all of the connections on the breadboard highlighted with yellow lines. Each set of 5 holes forming half a row, that's those on the left in columns A through E, and those on the right in columns F through J, is electrically connected. The power buses run vertically on the sides of the breadboard and are typically connected over more than 5 holes, but this can vary from breadboard to breadboard. The individual power buses are not connected to each other. Let's take a look at what all this means for a common demonstration circuit with a battery, a resistor, and an LED. When I turn the battery pack on, the LED lights up. Pretty simple. Now let's zoom in and see how I actually have everything connected on the breadboard. The battery pack's red lead is connected to the power bus on the right side of the breadboard. This is connected to a jumper wire that goes to row 5, which then goes to the LED, to row 5 on the other side, to a resistor, to the ground bus, and finally to the battery pack's black wire. This diagram shows how electricity flows through the circuit using yellow arrows. This is called a closed circuit, or a complete path for electricity to flow. Remember that on each separate half of the breadboard, the holes in row 5 are electrically connected to each other. This means that I can take the leads of the LED and move them to different holes in row 5 and it will still light up. However, if I take the LED and move it to a different row entirely, like row 4 or row 6, it will not light up because there is no path for the electricity to flow. It has to be in row 5 to have that complete path. You can also reconfigure the entire circuit. For example, here I'm going to move the LED and the resistor over to the right side of the breadboard and then connect the battery pack's negative wire to the ground bus on this side. While this looks different, electrically it is still the same circuit, so the LED still lights up. You can see that in this diagram by tracing the yellow arrows and noticing that there is still a closed path for electricity to flow. Now let's take a look at some of the most common mistakes that students make when learning to use a breadboard. Here we have the demonstration circuit from the previous part of the video with a battery, a resistor, and an LED. At first glance, everything looks fine, but when I turn the battery pack on, the LED doesn't light up. You won't know why unless you look closely at the breadboard. When we zoom in, you can see that one of the LED leads is actually in the wrong row. Notice that all of the connections are in row 5 except for this leg of the LED, which is in row 4. Remember that rows 4 and 5 are not electrically connected, so in order for electricity to have a closed path to flow, we need to move that LED lead over to row 5 and then it will light up. Every time you build a circuit, you should always double check your wiring to make sure your connections are in the right place. Another common mistake is not firmly pushing leads or wires into the breadboard all the way. Watch what happens if I pull this jumper wire out slightly so the connection is loose. The LED will still light up intermittently, but bumping the wire or shaking the breadboard can easily make the LED go out. To make sure the connection stays secure, you have to push the jumper wire firmly into the breadboard on both ends. The same goes for other components like the LED and resistor. You can see that if I pull the LED out slightly, it might look like it's pushed into the breadboard, but it's actually very loose and won't stay on. This is because the leads aren't pushed in all the way, so to make sure the LED stays on, you have to make sure it is firmly pushed into the breadboard along with the rest of the components. The next common mistake will depend on the individual components in the project you're doing. Some components have polarity, meaning the direction they're facing matters. LEDs are a very common example. Notice how if I grab the LED and flip it around, it doesn't stay lit. If you look closely at an LED, you'll see that the two legs are actually slightly different lengths. The longer leg is the positive side and has to be connected to the battery's red lead. The shorter leg is the negative side and must be connected to the black lead. The resistor, on the other hand, does not have polarity associated with it, so I can flip the resistor around and the circuit will still work just fine. When using a breadboard, you will have to decide what type of jumper wires you want to use, and there are several different types available. First are these long flexible wires that come in many different colors and are usually sold in packs of at least 10. The wires themselves are very flexible, but they have metal pins at the ends that make them easy to press into the breadboard. While these wires are great for simple circuits, they can get very messy with complicated circuits, and as you add more and more to a breadboard, you'll get a tangled nest of wires that can be very hard to keep track of. Another option is to buy a jumper wire kit like this. It comes with wires in many different colors that are pre-cut to different lengths. The ends of these wires are bent down 90 degrees, which makes it easy to press them into the breadboard and keep the wire flat, which makes circuits built with these wires much neater than circuits built with the longer flexible wires. The downside of these kits is that they usually only come with 1 or 2 lengths for each color, which can make it difficult to color code your circuit. The final option is to purchase spools of hookup wire and use a tool called wire strippers to cut your own jumper wires and strip off bits of the insulation so you can put them in the breadboard. You can see here I'm just taking the spool of wire, cutting a short segment of it, and then using the wire strippers to strip insulation off of each end. Then just bend the ends of the wires 90 degrees so it can sit flush against the breadboard, just like the pieces that come in the jumper wire kit. The advantage here is that you can buy several spools of wire of different colors and then cut them to any length you want so you can color code your circuit. If you do decide to buy your own wire, you need to make sure you buy solid core wire and not stranded wire. Solid core wire is made from a single solid piece of metal that is stiff enough to easily push into the breadboard. Stranded wire is made from multiple individual strands of wire. This makes the entire wire much more flexible, kind of like a rope, but it is too flexible to easily press into the breadboard. If you were watching closely earlier in the video, you might have noticed that I violated this rule when I connected the battery pack, which comes with stranded wires. If you're stuck with stranded wire and don't have access to any solid core wire, you can twist the strands together to make them a little stiffer and try gently pushing them into the breadboard, but this is a last resort and not the best option. Finally, all this time you might have been wondering what this gap that goes down the middle of the breadboard is for. This gap is sized such that integrated circuits, sometimes just called chips, that come in a dual inline package with 2 rows of pins, can fit straddling the gap in the middle of the breadboard. When you have a new chip, you might have to bend the pins together slightly, but then you firmly press the chip into the breadboard just like you would with any other component. This works great because now the pins on each side of the chip are each connected to their own row. What you don't want to do is put the entire chip on one side of the breadboard so it's not straddling the gap. Since the holes in each half row of the breadboard are connected, putting the chip in like this will create a short circuit between the 2 pins in each row, likely damaging the chip. Integrated circuits come in different sizes and serve different purposes. However, all dual inline package chips should fit straddling this middle gap. You can find a link to a written version of this tutorial along with other helpful electronics tutorials like how to use a multimeter, all in the description of this video. You can also find over 1,000 science project ideas with instructions in electronics and other areas of science at our website www.sciencebuddies.org.